Now for 12 News Legal Deep Dive, where we take a look at some of the biggest legal cases making headlines in Arizona and across the country. Friday, Lori Vallow will appear before an Arizona judge where she'll be representing herself. The so-called doomsday mom who used to live in Arizona was already convicted of killing her kids in Idaho, but is now facing charges here. The I-Team's Erica Stapleton is here now to break down how we got to this point. Erica?
Yeah, well, Tram, I was in the courtroom last month when the judge allowed her to waive her right to an attorney. And one of the biggest questions was why she would want to do something like this, especially given her history of competency concerns in Idaho. Vallow was convicted in 2023 in Idaho for killing her children Tylee and JJ, who used to live here in the valley. She was sentenced to life in prison in Idaho, and her current husband, Chad Daybell, was sentenced to death in Idaho for the same case. At one point in time, she was deemed incompetent in that case, and it took several months to restore her to the point of going to trial. Back in Arizona, she's facing 2 conspiracy to commit murder charges, one out of Chandler in the death of her former husband, the other a shooting attempt in Gilbert at her niece's ex-husband, who ultimately was not injured. Each case will have its own trial, and one of her prior attorneys raised some flags about her competency here in Arizona, but her most recent attorney said that wasn't necessary, and she was ultimately deemed fit for trial. Before allowing her to represent herself, the judge asked her a series of questions to make sure she understood that she'd be held to the same standard as an attorney.
There are serious disadvantages and dangers to representing yourself. Can you just tell me a little bit why you want to represent yourself?
Yes, Your Honor. For the past 5 years that I've been incarcerated, I have taken it upon myself to study case law and criminal rules of procedure in the state of Idaho and Arizona, as well as federally. Prior to that, for the last 10 years, prior to my incarceration, I did study procedure in family law, and I have real trial experience.
All right, well, someone who does have a lot of trial experience, criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law. Hector, what do you make of her reasons to represent herself?
You know, she laid a lot out in court. I think, there's been a lot made out of this, but I think what's at play is she feels as if what happened in Idaho, she wanted, I think what came out, she wanted to testify in Idaho. And she felt that her lawyers skewed that and, that it ultimately prevented her from testifying, right? She doesn't want that to happen again here. And I think she wants to make that decision. That is, this is a whole nother, it's a criminal case, a murder case, a lot of complications. This judge laid her through the dangers, the risks, the pitfalls. And I really question whether she completely understood and understands what that involves.
And Hector, Tram, I'll add that I covered the case in Idaho, and she, for years there, had the same attorneys that were helping her through the case, whereas here, she's kind of had a revolving door of public defenders. So that could maybe play into some of her reasoning there. And she said, I have trial experience. I'll point out that her experience is that criminal trial in Idaho where she was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, as well as some older family court cases that involved another ex-husband. So that's what she's referring to. So it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out.
When you're in court, you're constantly having to navigate the rules of evidence. You have to understand the rules and decorum of court.
Yeah.
As much as she's studied up in jail, again, kudos, but it's a whole nother, it's like taking a little league baseball player and throwing them into a major league game and saying, go at it.
Right, with very little time to learn.
Absolutely.
Right? We're talking years of experience, years of law school. And I think it's interesting that the judge was saying, I'm going to hold you to the standards of an attorney. He's not giving any slack just because, she doesn't really have the experience to represent herself.
Absolutely.
We've already seen some of this play out, too. She's filed a couple motions, and one of them was asking the Sheriff's Department, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, who she's currently in their custody, to release some records as it pertains to her extradition from Idaho to here. And the judge denied that because he said it's too broad. So I think she's really getting her first taste of this, and it'll be, again, really interesting to see how it plays out.
And she's also, spending time on these kinds of motions that a judge might look at it and say, okay, this really isn't relevant to what's going on right now. Lawyers that are getting ready for trial are looking at interviewing witnesses. They are filing substantive motions to preclude certain evidence. And, I think it's, I had a chance to just kind of skim what she did file. And, if that's any indication of what's to expect, this is going to be a very rocky road for Lori Vallow.
Do you think we are getting a status conference tomorrow? I plan to be in the courtroom. And as of right now, jury selection is set to start at the end of March. Do you think that's going to go forward as planned?
I would be surprised. Yeah, I think if she is, my understanding, she has advisory council. Advisory council is probably telling her, you know, you need to continue this trial so that you can get ready and prepare.
Yeah. All right, Hector, thank you so much. We're going to have more from Hector coming up in a few minutes when we revisit the California wildfires and looting now becoming a big issue.
Welcome back. I'm Troy Hayden, live in Malibu, California. We are standing right on the edge of the famous PCH, Highway 1, Pacific Coast Highway here. Only right now, firefighters, utility workers, law enforcement, and media can use this highway. So basically it is shut down except for emergency personnel, and it is quite busy even with just them on it. Over here, now this is looking east, this is looking inland. This is the cliff that comes down to the ocean, and you can see that entire cliff is blackened. The Santa Ana winds pushing this fire down this cliff, across the PCH, and into these beautiful homes on Malibu, right on the beach. Those homes now, as you can see, have been burned right down into the sand. Now, there are a lot of fire crews from all over the Southwest here helping with this fire, including crews from Phoenix Fire. 2 task forces are already working the Eaton fire, and that is over east of here, a little bit more inland. And one of them is a Task Force 1, the search and rescue team, Tram. And you know what they do? They come in, they search for victims. And unfortunately, it's not something we want to talk about here. We talk about all the evacuations, 180,000 people, 5 deaths. And it seems miraculous almost that we've only had 5 deaths with how fast these fires were. So these teams will be going through some of these burned out homes and looking for possibly more victims. The other thing you don't want to talk about, but we are talking about it today, is looting. The DA was on this morning talking about the fact that they had arrested 20 different looters going into some of these homes that have been evacuated, stealing things, and he said it will not be tolerated. People taking advantage of an awful situation.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because, yes, 20 people being arrested on suspicion of looting during the evacuations. And in fact, LAPD sending even more patrol up into these areas, especially with the Hollywood fire, you know, to make sure, and we just saw a cruiser there, to make sure that there are no more looters involved. Are you hearing any more of what police are doing?
No, but I mean, as you were just talking, I probably watched about 20 different police, cruisers come through here. I don't know where they're moving to, but they were going somewhere in a hurry. It's not easy to get into where we are right now. We have to show our credentials. Even residents trying to get back in here, Tram, can't get back in here. I think one of the main reasons, of course, is safety. There's all sorts of hazards here. But I think the number 2 reason is they don't want people coming into homes that are still standing, and there are quite a few of them, and trying to, steal things, basically, break in, do things they shouldn't be doing. So obviously I would imagine this entire community is going to look really down on those people, and they probably will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Troy, thanks. I know you're going to have more coming up in the hour. And right now, defense attorney Hector Diaz is back again with another legal deep dive. Hector, we talked about these looters. It is crazy to think that, during times of tragedy, people taking advantage of those who have lost everything. So, I mean, what kind of punishment could these looters face?
The most severe. The most severe. I think if you're out there, the DA has already made, send the message that if you're going to take advantage of people during an emergency, a state emergency like this, so severe, you'd better plan on getting the maximum punishment. I think it's 3 years of felony, 3 years of prison. And I don't think a judge will blink twice in terms of, if you're caught committing theft or burglary of a home that was in this evacuation zone.
Right.
And it's just incredible that people are doing this.
Yeah, no kidding. And rightfully so. A felony, that's really serious.
It is, yeah.
Speaking of the evacuations, it was interesting. The LA County Sheriff, Robert Luna, he also said that when there is an evacuation order, if you remain in the area, you're guilty of a misdemeanor. I was not aware of that. We always hear, when there is a natural disaster, hurricane, tornado, wildfire, you got to get out. When they say evacuate, you need to get out. And if you don't, you risk, basically crews not going in to help you. But the fact that if you choose to say this could be a misdemeanor?
Right. And the rationale is that, you're there, and let's say now they got to come and render aid to get you out. They could be exposing other firefighters to harm.
Right. Which is why they say, don't count on them to come save you.
One of the issues that I think, we're going to hear more about in the coming days is that you have a lot of real social media influencers that are going in, taking pictures, they're storm chasers, and that's a real issue because they're in areas that are, under evacuation and are doing this, posting it up to their Instagram or their Facebook. And I think we're going to see some fallout here because they've had, in some situations, firefighters that have gone in to rescue these, these individuals.
Yeah.
And so I understand. I understand the statute does require that it's willful, that you're willfully staying there. There might be some exceptions where somebody's there trying to save some pets or trying to save, get some mementos out. Again, listen, if you're in those zones, you got to get out.
Right.
But there's always exceptions in this situation.
All right, Hector, thank you. Let's take a legal deep dive into two cases making national headlines. Less than 2 weeks before his inauguration, President-elect Donald Trump faces a big legal day. On Friday, he's scheduled to be sentenced for falsifying business records related to hush money payments. Last May, if you'll remember, he was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records that stemmed from allegations that he had his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, pay adult film star Stormy Daniels $130,000 to keep an alleged affair she had with Trump a secret before the 2016 election. Trump denied the charges. Joining me again is criminal defense attorney Hector Diaz of Diaz Law. Hector, what do you think Friday's sentencing will be?
It will be a procession, and in the end, really nothing's going to happen. This will be a first time really in history that we see a president-elect going in to be sentenced on a felony conviction. This judge has already signaled in terms of why he's doing it and what's going to happen. The why is a jury sat, listened to evidence. He wants to honor that process, and he wants the sentencing to go forward and establish that he is convicted of a felony. However, he's not imposing any jail. He's not going to impose any fine, no probation.
So it sounds like it's a matter of formality.
It is. It's a formality establishing that he will have a conviction on his record.
Okay. So here's a question. Had Trump lost the election, do you think the judge would have actually imposed a jail sentence?
There's a very, very high probability in terms of what you read in the judge's order. This judge believed, he felt in his legal bones that this individual had no respect for the law, had engaged in deceptive practices. These are the things that, as a defense attorney, when you're reading an order, you lean over and you signal to your client, there's a high chance that you're going to go to jail today. And that, that's what you see here in terms of what he was saying. He's just not going to do it. He's not going to impose jail on a soon-to-be sitting president.
Yeah. All right. Next up on Trump's to-do list, once he takes office, Trump has promised to pardon all those who have been convicted or are being prosecuted for the insurrection that took place at the Capitol 4 years ago. Now we're talking close to 1,600 people. Hector, do you think that he'll pardon all those who have been convicted or prosecuted?
He's come out on his Truth Social and his, platform, whatnot, and said, sort of, I might.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. I think what they're going to do is, I think his administration, the lawyers, are going to look at each case. They're going to look at cases that had some allegation of violence, probably not going to get a pardon. Some that maybe didn't go into the Capitol, were there somewhere close by. It's going to be a case-by-case basis.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so say you have a client who's pending prosecution for the January 6th offense. What is your strategy?
Right now, we're going to wait. We're not going to do anything. We're going to wait to see what happens here. Trump hasn't officially taken office. And I would tell the client, let's see if he makes truth on that promise. Let's see what happens here. And let's, then we're going to talk once he takes office to the administration. I'd write a letter to, the Department of Justice and request and lay out the basis and why I believe a pardon is necessary and just under the situation. But that client's not going to plead guilty. We're not going to trial until I navigate those issues first.
Just pause and see.
Absolutely.
All right, Hector, thank you so much for all your deep dive analysis. We appreciate it.